The Phillies over the last couple of years in the playoffs have become known for one principal thing: the core of their team disappearing when they're needed most, leading to last season's loss to the Mets and this year's poor opening effort versus LA. And this motif was present yet again decidedly in Game 2, which they would eventually drop as well, with Turner, Schwarber, and Harper going a combined 1 for 10 with a single RBI and striking out 5 times. But even in a game that featured this kind of production from their big guys, they still had a chance to come back and at least tie things in the bottom of the ninth. It was at that time, however, that they decided to put on one of the dumbest plays you'll ever see on a major league field, and not for the reasons necessarily that you would think. Seriously, Philly fans, for those of you tuning in, I'm not just going to simply criticize the bunt call. There's much more to it than that. But before we get there, we have to look at the game as a whole. Last night's villain and then hero, Teoscar Hernandez, registered our first real notable play in the 4th inning, when, after 3 scoreless frames, mostly filled with domination by the day's 2 starting pitchers, Jesus Luzardo and Blake Snell, Teo tapped a ball back to the mound, and then just started jogging out of the box. Meaning that, despite Jesus bobbling the ball and then having it go off him towards third base, he was still able to get the veteran outfielder by plenty at first, flashing a big smile afterward. Both pitchers would then continue to carve up the opposing lineup for the next 2 frames. This would be where Philadelphia would put up their first real threat at the ballgame, with Trey Turner drawing a full count walk, and then stealing second in front of a Schwarber base on balls. This brought Bryce Harper to the dish, looking for a signature moment that would never come, as he struck out on a nasty, well-placed slider, leaving it all up to Alec Bohm, who on a 2-0 would swing at a pitcher's pitch, grounding routine ball to third base, with the play probably being a little closer than it needed to be since Miguel Rojas decided to race Turner, one of the fastest runners in the game, to the bag, making the play with a dive instead of a simple throw across the diamond. Still, he was out, taking us to the top of the 7th, when Hernandez impacted the contest again, this time in a positive capacity for his team by leading off with a single to center field, racing a third on the ensuing double off the bat of Freddie Freeman. This signaled the end of Luzardo's night, giving way to righty Orion Kirkring, who made his manager look smart at first with a strikeout on a near 100-mile-per-hour heater to Tommy Edman. This brought perennial playoff hero Kike Hernandez to the plate, who wouldn't manage to get off a big swing here, instead sending a little ground ball to shortstop Trey Turner, who made a slightly offline throw to the plate, allowing Hernandez, who actually has some pretty sneaky good speed, to slide in safely with the game's first run. But this wouldn't be where things would end, as with 2 outs and the bases now juiced, it was Will Smith's turn to come through, this time on a dying duck line drive to left field, scoring 2 more. Shohei would then follow with an RBI single of his own on a hard-hit line drive off of Nicolas Cage. Comment below if you get that reference, before Mookie Betts finally ended the frame on a fly ball to center field. Based on how things had been for the Philly offense at this point, the game seemed pretty much over, right? Well, not so fast. Max Kepler would lace a 1-out triple in the 8th to give them some degree of life, allowing Turner to score his teammate easily on a sharp single to center field. And with the middle of their order coming up yet again, this seemed like the perfect time to get something else going. But, like I mentioned in the intro, the disappearing act for Schwarber and Harper would continue, with Schwarb's K-ing and Bryce flying out. This takes us to the bottom of the 9th, where, down 3, hope was dwindling fast. Again though, they wouldn't just go peacefully into the night, getting 3 hits off of veteran Blake Trinan, with the last one being a 2 RBI hustle double that Nick Castellanos somehow managed to make contact with despite it being like a foot off the plate. This put the tying run on second, with nobody out. The Dodgers then brought in lefty Alex Vesia to face Bryson Stott, who would be attempting to, at a minimum, get the runner over to third. It was at this point disaster would strike for the city of brotherly love, as though he laid down what should have been a perfect bunt. The Dodgers had the wheel play on, allowing them to make a relatively routine out at third base, with Nick Castellanos sliding into the tag. Now, like I alluded to earlier, the stupidity in this play is not, in my opinion, the bunt itself. With Harrison Bader on deck, who would eventually line a single, moving Casty up to third while giving up an out wasn't a horrible idea to me. No, the dumbassery would come in 2 layers. First being the fact that the Phillies had to have known the wheel play was going to be on because Stott had already taken a pitch high, which allowed them to see all of LA's fielders move in this respect, meaning there was absolutely zero reason to keep the bunt play on as they were planning it. At a minimum, they needed to ask him to try to bring it with him towards second base or deaden it right in front of the plate, not push it to third, or just cancel it entirely and try to slap the ball through what was essentially a completely vacated middle of the field. But instead of any of that, they just proceeded as if they saw nothing. And then, to make matters worse, in an excellent segment that was pointed out specifically by Jimmy Rollins himself, Nick didn't even get a running lead off of second base despite the fact that there was nobody holding him on. as, again, on the wheel play, pretty much every infielder's out of the middle of the field, meaning that there's no reason not to get as big of a lead as humanly possible. Those are two mind-numbingly dumb aspects of this moment that contributed to it not working, and as you'd expect, it doomed the overall game entirely, as despite Bader's efforts, after a Max Kepler ground ball put them down to their final out, Roki Sasaki would come to the mound, managing to retire Trey Turner in one final big spot, despite the fact that Tommy Edman almost yipped this game away with a bad throw that was picked nicely by Freddie Freeman at first. All of this put Philadelphia just one game away from being bounced in the playoffs yet again, and with an aging roster and number of impending free agents, their fans, front office, and team themselves must be feeling their collars starting to tighten a bit. Alright everybody, if you made it this far, I appreciate you watching, and if you did, consider checking out any of these other videos on your screen right now for other content just like this. Also, if you ever see anything you'd like to see me detail in the video, feel free to reach out to my email, basebpoet@gmail.com, and if I end up using your idea, I'll give you a shout out. Thanks for watching, have a great rest of your day.